what's going on YouTube? In this video, I wanted to look at religion, particularly Christianity, and how it has negatively affected Africans in Africa. If Africans were as fierce in defending their natural resources like they are, about religion, then I think in Africa we would barely have any poverty, barely have any poverty in Africa. Um, Christians or Africans who are Christians spend so much of time, you know, worshiping and calling on the Holy Spirit, without realizing that, if the Holy Spirit has not come by now to save Africa from all of this disease, from poverty, then it's not coming. Okay. And it's just always so strange to me how Africans go about subscribing to this religion, which is foreign. Because say whatever you want to me, Christianity is foreign. There was no Christianity in Africa before colonization. So the way in which they go about, subscribing to this religion without being critical, without questioning, it's just always so strange to me. And what I always find also a bit confusing is that whenever you ask, Africans important questions, or questions that I at least feel are important, questions like how do we go about decolonizing the African mind? Questions like how do you go about making sure that we are in control of our natural resources so that we can alleviate poverty? Questions like how do we restore dignity in the African community? Whenever you and I engage them in such topics, they're not available to have such discussions. But the minute you are critical of Christianity, then you will see them come out of the woodwork. And I think we as Africans have got our priorities mixed up. I think there are more pressing issues right now in Africa than just religion and Christianity. And it's just always so weird that, if I'm talking about questions like, decolonizing the African mind, African Christians have got absolutely nothing to say. But the minute you're critical of Christianity, they have got a ton of things to say to you. So since when does Christianity become more important than your fellow African brothers and sisters? Since when did Christianity become more important? That's why sometimes, when people allude to, Christians, African Christians being, mental slaves, I can sort of see where they're coming from, because it does appear that, some Africans who are Christians are blinded by religion. And, religion is actually it's actually set up like, a business, in that it uses hierarchy. You've got the Pope, you've got the bishops, you've got the deacons, and I don't know in which order. And then you've got the churchgoers at the bottom. And what's always strange to me is, why does the church continue collecting money from people? In Africa, you find the poorest family who will go to church on a Sunday, okay, and give whatever money they have to the church. Now, my thing is, why wouldn't you rather take whatever money you have and use it to invest it in something that would in turn help your family, instead of giving whatever money you have to the church? I guess the deception is, the more you give, the more you receive. These churches have just become such a huge money making scheme. It just is really grand financial organizations. We've got these pastors making a lot of money. I know, we've got TB Joshua in Nigeria. His net worth is estimated at around, $15 million. We've got Pastor Chris. He's also from Nigeria. His net worth is estimated at like 150 million. So these pastors are making a lot of money um, from these organizations, and I just don't know why wouldn't you know pastors or these church leaders, since they've got such a platform as big as church, wouldn't they rather use their platform for the good of society, particularly Africans, seeing as how most of us are struggling post colonial times? Wouldn't they rather use the church as a platform to restore faith and dignity within the African community? I mean, of course, I'm not blaming all of Africa's problems on Christians and churchgoers and church leaders, but I am just finding it strange how it would seem that Africans have chosen or choose religion and Christianity over issues that I would think are important as the people of Africa, seeing as how we have you know being we negatively affected by colonization. We were negatively by because religion and Christianity did negatively affect the African community. It broke down our cultures because when missionaries came to Africa, they told Africans that their way of life was barbaric. They told Africans that their culture was primitive, and basically they said all of that, just the most negative things that one can say about another person's culture. That's what they did when they came to Africa. So religion and Christianity definitely negatively affected Africans. So that's why it is strange, that sometimes Africans don't look at religion so critically. So I just think, it's about time that we sort of reevaluate some of the cultures that we have adopted from some of the Western cultures that we have adopted in Africa. And I think it's high time that we sort of try and go back to sort of our ways of doing things. I think it would be difficult to 100% go back into things exactly like how they were done pre-colonial times, but I definitely think that we need to reevaluate some of the Western cultures that we have adopted over the years, because we can never prosper, and we can never lead globally if we are not authentic. Okay, we can never beat Western people at being Western. In order for us to have a competitive advantage in the global scale, we've got to be authentic. Okay, we've got to be sure of who we are and know ourselves, and that's the only way that we can ever hope to compete on a global scale. We cannot beat other people at being them. It cannot be.
Is the thing most of all that generate enthusiasm in our knowledge and understanding of things. The concept of God. Because when we say God, or when we say concept of God, people are wondering what we are talking about. And we are say, if we use the word God, it's because we want to make people understand from the perspective of them looking to understand what we're saying. But I rest assured that most of you who are listening to me right now, non-apologetically we are talking now. Anytime you say God, I know the same thing me I talk about. I don't know how you're going to figure that out, but anytime you say God, I know that Mutabaruka I think about. So, in order not to create the confusion, I don't talk about God as it relates to my knowledge and belief system that come out of my vocabulary. And it takes years to say, move that. It's almost like you have to put a torch inside of you and burn it out. You have to burn out that concept where them give you, where them give me over the years. That's when we talk to other people. They might wonder from whence come this brother with this talk. But we go back to our childhood. And if you notice, a child not born with no concept of God. But guess what? When them hear it, him question it. So we'll have to become like a child to question that concept. So we are asked to question them. We are like a child with an axe. Because in our deepest consciousness, it don't make sense to him. Even them don't expose to a whole heap of things. But when he's told certain things, we not talk about a one where go train now for go at school, for go understand and learn certain things. We talk about a child where just a run up and down amongst them playmate them. And the mother just take him and carry him to church. The mother just put on some clothes on him, comb him here. Him not have nothing to do with nothing more than just live as a youth. Nothing to do more than just live. But deep within that living, there's a certain thing that bubbling in him or her. That's when them hear it. After a while, it just don't make no sense. And you have to realize, if it don't make no sense, you have to find what makes sense. So we reach the stage and we go through the levels where whole heap of things when we grow up with don't make no sense. Just like the youth, where don't see certain things make sense. And then you come experience certain things, now you realize, but really and truly, that is why it don't make no sense. Because that's what the experience I got teach you now, wisdom. Because that's the only thing experience can teach you, wisdom. And you come realize, oh, that is why it don't make no sense. It don't make no sense because when you have the wisdom now, you can reason and rationalize why in the childhood, baby stage, it never made no sense. And if you can articulate what you know as a child or what you believe as a child and come to understand as a big person who has experienced certain things, if you can articulate it, then the manifestation of that understanding through articulating what you say you and come to know now what you did believe when you was a child will be so amazing. People will look at you and say, where you get them reasons from? As a matter of fact, some of them will even start to label you. Say you're a madman or you're a devil, you're a Satan and all these things. Because them still in the mystery of life. A whole heap of people still in the mystery of life. Them see life as mysterious. So anything where them can't explain, them put it over to some mysterious thing. What them don't call it thing. Them get all gender. Gender them get. So because you don't give it a gender now, you become almost the same thing where them create in their mind as God. It's the same thing them create in their mind as devil. And don't realize all of these two things them is emanating from the one source. All of it is emanating from the one source. That one source is themselves. Because there's no God outside of you and there's no devil outside of you. God and devil is a manifestation of the human construct. Him construct that and him connect it to him destiny or to him life where man live as of now. It has nothing to do with nothing else. But we grew up in a system. We grew up in a system for tell we say there's some intervention that is happening when something happens to you good and some intervention is happening to you when something bad. And all the interventions come through your actions. That is what the interventions are. It's your action that decide your destiny. It's your action decide who you will be or who you should be. There's no wrong and right outside of the human construct. None. Because only human beings live in that order. There's no wrong except the wrong that man create. And there's no right except the one that man create. Because when him wrong, him set laws to judge that wrong. And when him right, him set laws to fulfill that right. In put things in order and place it in order so that the community and the society can either be at peace or be at war with each other. There's no outside force that we can look at and say, he this or she that. or devil is doing this and God is doing that. All of these things emanates from man. Should I say woman too? All of it. Because right through human beings on the earth, we have had all different kind of gods who was claiming to be doing things for the human being, for kings and queens and peasants. All of these things existed. When the Greeks was looking at Zeus, Z-E-U-S, as the god of all the gods them in Greek, they used to pray to God, that Zeus. They used to believe that Zeus was doing things for them and helping them in all situations, even the planting of them food and the destruction of them food. And they create sons of Zeus, Hercules, and all of these different gods. And you could have never, thousands of years ago, you couldn't go into Greece and tell them that Zeus was not something that was tangible. So who believe in Zeus today? I don't know of no one who believe in that. There was a time when people used to believe in the Caesars, and people create things around the Caesars. People used to build up monuments and look at the monument, inanimate object, and say this object is what is going to satisfy them need to understand themselves and other things and other beings. And generations of generations come, generations after generations, creating God and creating mysteries around God and making God become a supernatural being, yet still not tangible. So can it be a being and not tangible? The very word itself, being, is something that is tangible. It's the manifestation of something. And then you have supreme beings. Supreme is something that is human construct. Supreme means that you are above the rest. Like if Usain Bolt was in Greece, he would be a supreme being. He run faster than every other man. They would put him up in a statue and say, this is the God of running. You know, just like how them have the God of food, and the God of love, the God of the sea, the God of war, the God of thunder, and right through different history, in different nations, in different names, gods are created to satisfy man mystery that he can't explain about himself or the things around him. So he have to give it over to the powers that him don't know, but him believe. Him believe that make him understand clearer to him. It clearer to him if him give it over to something that him believe in. And then when him realize that work for him start to create a thing named religion around that belief. Him create something named religion around that belief. And religion come with all sort of rituals and perspectives and perceptions. And the more I'm going to perspectives and perceptions, the more it get mysterious. But because it worked for him have to instill it in people who don't believe what him believe in. So it create wars and animosity. Because the next man have to create for him own reality. Or so him think is for him reality. So him create mysteries around where him have. And it create war against the other person. Because him create a thing named religion. So it go on for thousands of years. and the strong survive. Whosoever can have the most, well, not that gun at the time, but sword and soldiers, whosoever can fight and win the fight to maintain that mysterious thing that them create and put it in a thing named religion. Whosoever can fight for that thing that them create, and whosoever can manipulate what them believe in about that thing, conquer. So we look on this Western world. This Western world give us mysteries that we will never decipher. Because if you start to decipher it, you will realize a mystery is only something that is there because what you don't call it a mystery because you don't understand the workings of it. But when we start to understand the workings of these mysteries that them give to us, when we start to realize that the complexity that we think is complex is nothing more than a man trying to elevate for him belief system and then use it to control and manipulate everyone else who don't understand it. So we know what this trial know. And we recognize that. It's seen as somebody who is doing something. And even though a whole heap of people might not agree with the something, them still recognize that it is something to be honored. Whole heap of people, even though them don't agree with it, because not everything that them don't agree with them honor. People don't just honor things, especially when you do agree with it. But I bet you that most of the people them who say, Mutabaruka, why me honor you for you do, you know. I bet you most of them don't believe what me I say. But there's a thing named respect and how you bring across what you do when you do it. That sometimes it confound even the man who would like kill you because of what you say and what you're doing. So you get honored. And we give thanks for the honor. We give thanks for the honor because we recognize, yes, we are doing something that even if a whole heap of people don't accept what I say, but them realize it is a legitimate voice that will make them think. I was in St. Martin one time and a white boy see the rest them and listen to me and him come on the radio and say, you must not listen to Mutabaruka because he will change how you think. Right away you know say it change him. Yeah, he might tell the nation because he have the radio just like how me and say, don't listen to that brother, you know, because if you start to listening, you will start to change how you think. Because it's only one way, and that is Jesus Christ. That is what I'm telling people them in St. Martin's for the radio. Amazing. So look how long them are reign. Look how long them are rule. 2,000 years them are rule and are reign. And look on the earth. And look what is happening to plants and animals, birds, flowers, trees, human being for 2,000 years. That mystery system, that belief system, has not been able to confront the devil and the God in man and confound it. Because there's no way you can look on God as peaceful and still have the devil as a wicked. Because you balance one with the other. And as long as there is a devil, there will be a God. And as long as there is a God, there will be a devil. Them can't do without one another because that is the human mind. And the human mind say, if you believe in a God, you must have to believe in the devil. So which one you going to get rid of? Because anyone you get rid of, you're going to get rid of the two of them. What me say? Me say there's two construct, there's two human construct that man use to confound himself and others. And that is the God and the devil. And me I say, right as some Mutabaruka said, any one of them you get rid of, the other one will gone. Anyone. And if you don't want to get rid of none of them, you will always sit in that belief system that will perpetuate the same very things that you don't want to happen in you and upon the earth. But as long as you have one of them in your head, the other one must exist. So in order to clear up the whole heap of madness we are going on in the earth, you have to get rid of one of them. Because if you get rid of one of them, the other one will go on too. Because those two is the problem. Those two thinking is the problem. And as long as you have those two thinking as a problem, you go and say, this is the cutting edge on RFM. Yeah, this is the cutting edge on RFM. You know, in the early 2000, there was a sister that, well, I wouldn't say frequent, but has been on the program in the studio with you more than one time. As a matter of fact, is one of the guests, them were coming at the studio more than any other guests we have. And you know, a long time people ask me which part should they, you know. So, what Muta, when last this year? Good night, Queen Mother.
Blessed good night, Muta. How are you?
Well, I know it's a whole heap of people, you know, I'm glad to hear your voice, you know, Mother.
Thank you.
Yeah, man, I know people are glad to hear you. So, how you take so long to come back to Jamaica?
Well, there were many reasons why I came back this time. I been away for a minute. There were so many things I had to get taken care of in other places, but I had to come for Buju's show, and I was a guest of Sister Marcia Griffin, and I had to be here in Jamaica to honor you for your event, the Achievement Award. You know, I didn't care where I was on the planet. It was just so important to make it on Sunday because you are well overdue to be honored in Jamaica and on the international level. So it was my blessing and my honor to make sure that I don't care where I was, to be in Jamaica for your award, you know?
Yes. Give thanks to see you. Give thanks. So what have you been doing since the past so much years we don't hear from? What you been doing?
I've been organizing and traveling and doing some things with UTWA. And UTWA means Universal Traditions of Wisdom of Amexem. This is Northwest Amexem which is Northwest Africa. Doing a lot of research, doing a lot of studying on our traditional ancient ancestors and our existence of being here in Northwest Africa. A lot of people don't understand what annexed means, that it is Northwest Africa. When they do Black History Month, they only give us the honor of 28 days for that 1 month. And with the magnetism of our people being on the planet for millions of years, that's a very short time. We have 365 days in a year of our existence. So it's so important that we learn the roots of our ancestors. I was listening to you, and you were talking about the names and the importance of names when you're doing your tribute, and the changing of the names and the recognition of the names, and how names are so important because they dwell energy, power, and spirit. And your name generally identifies with your culture and your land and the indigenous people of the land. So been doing a lot of researching and a lot of studying with different people on the anthropology level and cultural level, and reflecting on some of the things that you are doing.
Okay. So
it's all important that we in oneness,
You're still in Detroit?
Yeah, I'm there when the spirit moves me. I'm up there, with some very conscious brothers and sisters that are there. And wherever else I have to go, you understand?
Long time I don't come through this, though. Long time I don't come through there. Believe you me.
Well, we need to.
Come I couldn't not like me up there again,
Yeah, we love you and we need you up there. You need to come back. It's an ice box right now.
Yeah, we know that. I see that. I definitely see that. See that. Trust me. So you've been making the circles. I mean, I know that you're amongst Marcia, but come down to watch you have to come from a program.
Well, most definitely, OT is one of my footprints, and I love OT, and the people have been very beautiful to me. And OT and all over Jamaica. Jamaica is, to me, Jolene, one of the most beautiful places on the planet is Jamaica. Even though we're all going through many of our trials and tribulations, not just in, Ochi, but the beauty is there. And the people, even though, like I say, they go through trials and tribulations, the beauty is still there, and the reflections of the indigenous people is very powerful and very strong.
So let me ask you still have your core shells with you? I mean, you're still doing your work?
Oh, most definitely. That's the totality of my existence. As a traditionalist, I am a traditional healer, spiritualist, and herbalist. I'm a master herbalist. And all of this ties into my ancestral tree of life. There's so much going on with our people, different illnesses and things of that nature. And as a spiritualist, we have to get to the roots of our identity and our culture,
of course,
and learn about the herbs. I was listening to your daughter, to Aishi, on Sunday, and she was talking about how you ate out of the calabash. And it's so interesting. Me too.
Look here, we still eat out of it.
Me too.
We have more calabash than plate on my yard.
Well, my calabash came from Oji, and I'm looking at my calabash right now, that's the connection
Yes.
of our great Mother Earth from the trees and the trees of life. And when you eat out of a calabash, that's something very sacred because it comes straight directly from the great Mother Earth.
Yes.
So, yes, I have my cowrie shells and I have my calabash and my crystals and everything directly in alignment.
In Jamaica, in Jamaica, the work that you do, they would say you're an Obia woman. you're the prettiest Obia woman I have ever been around. Believe you me. They would call you an Obia woman, but guess what? I remember when I put you on the radio a couple years ago, all the people them who never think they would have go visit a Obia woman, call the program and then end up and look for you. That you had to open place now for receive all of these people who claim say them not believe in all these things, but them run go to you quick. So, it's amazing. It's amazing.
But something, Muta, the serious thing that's so important that we must understand, and that is the inner self and the inner us. We're called juju, voodoo, obia, whatever you want to call it, but the Most High lives inside of us. And as traditional people and cultural people, we've been taught and told to not believe in ourselves. Our ancient ancestors told us that the Most High lives deep inside of us. And I tell you one thing, what won the revolution in Haiti or Haiti is those people that believed in themselves.
Yeah.
They believed in the elements of the universe.
Bookman.
They believed in their ancestors.
Bookman is a main source of that, man.
Exactly.
Yeah, Bookman.
Exactly. Because you must never forget about your ancestors. When you look in a mirror, you are remembering the ancestors because they live inside of you. So when we develop other people's cultures and other people's religions, and I won't even say spirituality because it's not spirituality, because if it was spirituality, it would be connected directly to the universal energy of our ancestors. But when we take upon names of other people in their religious beliefs, then we disconnect ourselves from our own ancestors and lift up the power of other people's ancestors. That's why names are very important, because they develop energy, power, and spirit. So we have to go deep within ourselves. We're now in a time what is called Mayat. And Mayat means justice and truth. And it means that the rise of the return of the women and also the return of ourselves. Because people are going to start seeing things. What they say, something told me this and something told me that. And who is the something that told you this and that, So in other words, we're going to start believing more in ourselves and returning back to who we are as a people. Once we come back to the full circle of believing in our ancestors and our own culture, then we're going to rise up as a greater, powerful people. Like they say, Ethiopia shall rise again. Ethiopia is a Greek name that means people of the sunlight. So we are the people of the sun. We are the people of the sun. We are the melanated people of the sun on the planet. So we must return back to our true beliefs of who we are and our spirituality. And it's coming back very powerfully.
Yeah, well, it's slowly but surely, slowly but surely. So when are we going to see you again? When are we going to see you again?
I'm sorry, Muta. What did you say, please?
No, I'm saying, when are we going to see you again?
Well, as soon as you would like to see me, I'm going to use some special, beautiful cultural magic, and, and I'm going to kick your doors in.
I remember you usually just come. You usually just come to Jamaica. You know, you have to use some magic now to come. You know?
Well, I give thanks that I'm still here bumping around on the island. You know, Jamaica is jolly, and that's home for me. You know, honestly, as soon as I put my footprint on the land, it's a return of myself and all the ancestors, and I just love it. You know, there's no place like Jamaica. There's some awesome places in Africa on that side of West Africa, but this Northwest Africa, Northwest of Mexico, is awesome.
Yes.
Awesome, it is awesome.
Well, you look Marcia for me, even though we was together Sunday most of the time inside of the auditorium there, because she come and sat beside me, and you know, one of the children, well, she know that only one album I've made and she was done it. You know, but every album that Mutabaruka do, no, 2 albums I should say, that she wasn't featured on the album, you know.
Well, she
so definitely
was looking forward to. There's no way she would not have been there on Sunday.
Well, we know that, and to figure that she came and sit beside me for the whole time, you know. And when I was doing the tune,
I saw that. It's sort of comical because when one person got up out the seat, I say, now, would it be improper for me to rush over there and get next to Muta too?
No, you know, the tune that got her up out of the seat, you know, is a tune that she actually did the background vocals for. A thing named I Am the Man, Never Get Weary Yet, down in the valley for a very long time. She was the chorus behind that song. You know, she always loved that. So, yeah, man, we give thanks, you know. So she get up out there and dance like crazy.
I most definitely will give her love and light from you, you know. But I'm available right now to whatever you would like to help me to do. And it would be an honor.
The thing with this now is that the phone, you are on the phone.
Yes.
So if anybody would have to call me, they would be on the phone too. You would have to actually be in the studio.
Okay.
And free up the phone line.
So when is my next good time with you?
Well, you have to come back.
Uh-oh.
When you're leaving? When you're leaving?
Well, it's really interesting. I was supposed to be booked for this coming up weekend, and then I talked to my travel agent, and he's telling me now that it has to be a few more extra days. So, it's coming up. When is your next time? When your next show?
My next show is next week.
Next week, Wednesday?
Yeah, it's usually Wednesday we have the show.
Well, I have to check with my travel agent, all right?
All right, you check and see, and then we can line up something.
Well, that sounds like good news to me. I would be honored. My family always tease me. They tell me, you know, you never come back when you're supposed to. Are you really coming back? So,
I love people have me for you over years. I don't remember. How much years now you don't come to Jamaica?
Definitely 8 years.
8? Right.
Yeah.
That's a lot, you know, see.
Muta, you know, number 8 is the Alpha and the Omega, is the ending of a new beginning.
This is what you want to say. 8 years is a long time.
Yeah, it's a long time. But it's right on time. Everything is in divine order.
All right, so we'll give thanks and, you know, just check it out and then just call me and let me know.
I most definitely will, Muta, and blessed love to you and all the other people that are listening in tonight.
Yeah, give thanks.
My honor and my blessing, all right?
Yeah, give thanks.
All right, thank you.
All
right, peace and love.
Yeah, that was Queen Mother Oshundara Nefertiti. You know, she as we say, is a voice. So if you have been listening to the cutting edge over the years, you'd know her voice and know, say, she no easy. She no easy, you understand? So, if she there, most definitely. Because there's a lot of new listeners now. New listeners who don't even know what we're talking about. You know, I hear me call her the prettiest woman I ever see and know when she is. Believe you me, she coming from the Nigerian Yoruba tradition, even though she born in America, but she I did it such a day, you understand? So yeah man, if she's here, most definitely, you know, cause what she make reference to, even though she can do it on the phone, but it'll cloud up the next line. You understand? So we want to make, she have to be in the studio. Forget the fullness of what we are talking about. She have to be in the studio. So we hope that she'll be here. If not, I just saw it go. This is the cutting edge on RFM. A little while ago we was playing Louis Farrakhan. We want to play Louis Farrakhan. Continue.
Look at a speech delivered by a white slaveholder, Willie Lynch.
The man called Louis Farrakhan, you know, we want to yell up Elaine Wint and Ellis Kelly. You know, when I tell Cabo them say, who for MCs, I say, I want Elaine Wint and Ellis Kelly. And there's a reason why I wanted the two of them. But listening to Ellis, which I never know, Elise said when she used to the RJR and them place there, and Elaine Wint was on the radio, she said Elaine Wint was her mentor. I never know that, because that was not the reason why I asked Elise Kelly and Elaine to come deal with this situation. I never know, say she saw Elaine Wint in that light. Now, the reason why I chose the two of them is that Elaine Wint was the first person to have a program that actually featured me on television reading my poetry. First I've ever been on TV was Elaine Wint program. Elise Kelly, when she was at RJR, I used to listen to her and I say, you know, say, this is one of the nicest person on radio to me. And it was relating to the music where she used to play, because I feel no way Elise know the music. So in the 80s when I decided I was going to start the black music sound system, it was the first sound system in Jamaica to actually play CD. As a matter of fact, we bring CD in that studio. The first person to bring CD in that studio was we. Anyway, when I started I was going to launch this sound system, black music, a Zing Fence. And the lady that came to my mind was Elise Kelly. And to see that me and Elise Kelly now is on the same radio station, on the same day, blazing up the airwaves, is a wonderful feeling. Wonderful feeling. So I want to give thanks for Elaine Wint and Elise Kelly for participating in that momentous occasion. Yes, and you know, she did an interview with you and she will play the part 2 tomorrow. We know she's not listening, but I hope somebody who's listening can tell her that she's the best female on radio to me. I don't care nobody what I say. Our breath of the music, I don't know of no other disc jock female disc jock on radio, where it's so extensive in her knowledge of the music. She can play any old music, any new music, and any music where to come. She can play it. And she know what to play and how to play it. So we want to big up Elise Kelly. Yeah, we want to big up Elise Kelly. And it is a joy to come to the studio at Thursday evening time. If you just share a little space there. Just that little space. Because it's a big space. It's a big space. Okay, so we just play Farrakhan, well, 2 songs in between Farrakhan, and I refer him again. Surprise me. For those of you who wasn't there, we want to play a clip where was really amazing to hear. This clip, amazing to hear it. Let me see if we can line it up here. Okay, no line up.
Of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Minister Lewis, greetings to you. I am Minister Louis Farrakhan, National Representative of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. What a joy it is to have words to say to my beloved friend, brother, and companion in struggle, Mutabaruka. I am so proud of you, my brother, that they are giving you a Lifetime of Service award. You have earned it by the wonderful way you have helped to guide and make the people of the Caribbean joyous at your poems and at your music. And so I too feel like it is my honor to say these few words to you at a time like this. The name of your radio show is The Cutting Edge. And you have always been at the cutting edge of the things that happen to black people in America, in the Caribbean, in Africa. You have dedicated your life to our struggle to attain in reality the 3 great principles of life itself: freedom, justice, and equality. And we know that these principles are right before us. They're in our hands. But what we have to do is struggle against the ignorance of self that keeps us divided one from another. Now, I understand that President Trump has invited 5 prime ministers of 5 different nations to meet him in Mar-a-Lago, thanking those 5 nations for their assistance with Venezuela. I just wanted to say, through you, Mutabaruka, to our prime ministers from Jamaica, the Bahamas, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, President Trump and his administration is interfering in the affairs of a sovereign nation. I hope that these prime ministers and premiers of these beautiful Caribbean islands are not sold on anyone interfering in the internal affairs of a nation. And we are on the cutting edge of doing something either to aid or abet the overthrow of a legitimately elected official in what Jimmy Carter in 104 elections said is the cleanest, the fairest that he has seen. So why is Maduro being ousted? Why do they want him out of the way? Beloved brothers and sisters who are watching this tribute to a warrior, a man that stays at the cutting edge, a man that refuses to compromise his dignity as a principled black man for any favor that somebody might wish to give him to silence or weaken his voice. That's why you're getting a Lifetime of Service award, because you have never sold out to the forces that don't like your voice at the cutting edge. Several years ago, our sister Eugenia Charles from Dominica spoke with Ronald Reagan. He used a leader from the Caribbean to invite him into the Caribbean with military force to attack the island of Grenada and destroy that socialist thinking, kill the prime minister, and try to turn that island back to what they call democracy, which none of us really have achieved in the United States of America, much less under white supremacy and its rule. So I'm hoping that this message will get to these prime ministers, that if Mr. Trump asks you to invite him, as Eugenia Charles was asked to be invited by Ronald Reagan to justify his murder of a prime minister and the disruption of his government, I hope that at the cutting edge you will say thank you, but no thank you. And believe me, they will offer you all some nice things that you would desire. But if you accept it and lose your soul, then is it better for you to have the little money or trinkets or whatever they promise you? Because a liar will never follow his promise. And that is our experience with our ever watchful enemy. So, beloved, Mutabaruka, thank you for the privilege of allowing me to honor you at this time. And I pray that my Prime Minister of Jamaica and the Bahamas and Haiti and the Dominican Republic and I think it is St. Lucia, I hope you will not make the mistake that Eugenia Charles made, that makes her name go down in history as one who violated sacred principles to achieve what for Dominica. So thank you for this privilege. May Allah God bless you, guide you, protect you, and grant you knowledge, wisdom, understanding, and power through the word, that we may put to a perpetual flight Satan and his imps, for we are truly at the cutting edge.
Yeah, this is the Coaching Edge on IRFM. We want to play this clip here. We're upon this.
For the last few weeks, the world's focus has been on Venezuela as Trump pushes for regime change. Almost every media outlet paints the same picture, that Venezuela is a brutal dictatorship in a starving nation, one that demands intervention, and that they finally have a solution to the crisis, a legitimate claim to power by an opposition politician, Juan Guaido.
As civil society collapses, America confronts the socialist dictatorship.
Maduro stole the previous election. He locked up and he tortured anyone trying to unseat him.
There's no toilet paper some days in Caracas. They're eating zoo animals. What happened? Well, you know what happened. They implemented socialism.
The eyes of the revolution are everywhere. President Maduro's militia still trying to keep the people in line.
Guaido is investing in the people, whereas Nicolas Maduro is investing in the army.
So this is a neighborhood Juan Guaido feels safe in. This is one of the wealthier neighborhoods of Caracas.
Despite the faux dissent against Trump's domestic policies, the corporate media has lined up to support his coup in Venezuela. Tech giants like Facebook and Twitter are doing their part to shape the narrative too, recently removing 2,000 accounts for spreading pro-Maduro messaging to, quote, influence people.
Would you personally negotiate with Nicolas Maduro to convince him to exit?
Well, he has requested a meeting, and I've turned it down because we're very far along in the process.
Trump has said a military option is on the table, with coup leader Juan Guaido suggesting he will request it.
People don't recognize that Hezbollah has active cells. The Iranians are impacting the people of Venezuela. We have an obligation to take down that risk for America.
All options are on the table. All options are on the table.
All options are on the table.
The United States now looks forward to watching each corner of the triangle fall in Havana, in Caracas, in Managua.
The days of socialism and communism are numbered.
Libertad, libertad, libertad.
Their latest cynical stunt is weaponizing aid to hold Maduro's government hostage. In the latest war escalation, the U.S. announced the delivery of so-called aid via military aircraft to the border.
It's an abomination to humanity to stop basic necessities and goods from entering your country to help your own people.
Is there any concern that something like this would provoke him from doing something even more drastic?
What happens if he doesn't let that aid through?
Well, look, the aid is going to get through. And I think ultimately the question is whether it gets through in a way that he's cooperative with or in a way that he's not.
From Iraq to Libya to Venezuela, what usually preempts U.S. military intervention is the pretext of a humanitarian crisis. And right now, pretty much everyone speaks with authority about the fact that there is a human rights crisis caused by the Maduro government. What is surprisingly absent from the discourse is testimony from the human rights investigator designated by the UN to assess said crisis. Alfred de Zayas was the first UN investigator to go to Venezuela in 21 years. He has written 13 reports for the UN Human Rights Council, but his report on Venezuela was largely ignored. I spoke with Alfred to find out why.
If you know a humanitarian crisis in Gaza and in Yemen, and in Syria, and in Sudan, and in Somalia, you wouldn't say there is a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela. And at no point when I was walking the streets in Venezuela did I feel threatened, or did I see violence, or did I consider that this country was undergoing a humanitarian crisis. But I see human rights more and more being instrumentalized to destroy human rights. There is a weaponization of human rights. I see the rule of law being instrumentalized to destroy the rule of law, and unfortunately, the complicity of the mainstream media. What I'm saying to you, I think it would have been sensible to say it to the BBC. It would have been sensible to say it to the New York Times and to the Washington Post and to The Economist and to the Financial Times, but at no time since I returned from Venezuela and since my report was officially presented to the Human Rights Council have I been approached by any of these organs who actually have a responsibility vis-a-vis you and vis-a-vis me and vis-a-vis the people of the United States to inform.
You know, many people will say the crisis cannot be blamed on the sanctions, of course, that sanctions are being used as a scapegoat for Maduro's economic failures. Alfred, talk about the impacts of the sanctions thus far and the new sanctions that were just implemented on the state oil company.
What is particularly Machiavellian, what is particularly cynical, is to cause an economic crisis that threatens to become a humanitarian crisis. That's what the United States has done through the financial blockade, through the sanctions, and then to say, oh, we're going to offer you humanitarian help. We're sending so and so many tons of humanitarian assistance through U.S. aid. We're sending it to Colombia, and we're going to deliver it. Now, I think that here Juan Guaidó is being shall we say, the jockey. He is riding on the Trojan horse of the United States. But the solution of the problem is much easier than the Band-Aid of sending some packages of food or of medicine. The solution is in my report. What I told the Human Rights Council is that the financial blockade has had extremely adverse human rights impacts. Obviously, the origin of the current economic crisis is in the fall, the dramatic fall in the price of oil. But normally, you would be able to fix that. A country as wealthy as Venezuela should have been able to borrow money on its enormous natural resources and then would have been able to buy and sell like anybody else. But no, the United States has made sure that because of the threat of enormous penalties to the U.S. Treasury, the banks have been closing the accounts of the Venezuelan government and of the Petróleos of Venezuela. Already in July 2017, Citibank unexpectedly decided, without prior notice and arbitrarily, to close the bank accounts of the Central Bank of Venezuela and the Bank of Venezuela in November 2017. Again, Citibank blocked the transfer for a shipment of more than 300,000 doses of insulin. In November 2017, the company Euroclear retained $1.65 billion that the Venezuelan government had paid for the purchase of food and medicine. Citgo, the Venezuelan state oil company based in the U.S., has not been able to transfer its profits outside the United States of America. It needs that money to buy food and medicine. And it is in the neighborhood, I think, by now of $9 or $10 billion that have been withheld. There again, Wells Fargo Bank withheld and canceled payment of $7,500,000 made by Brazil to Venezuela for the sale of electricity. Deputies, parliamentarians, had been elected through fraud. This was demonstrated, and the Supreme Court was called to make a decision, and they instructed the National Assembly, as it is foreseen in the Constitution of Venezuela, to rerun those elections. And this National Assembly was confrontational. It was intransigent, didn't want to do that. So it was declared in contempt. So since that moment on, whatever the National Assembly does has no legal validity in the context of Venezuelan constitutional law. It's not for us, Americans or Swiss or French, to say we disagree. That is for the Venezuelan authorities to determine whether the actions of the National Assembly are constitutional or not.
Now we get to the Constituent Assembly, widely condemned as a strangely termed self-coup. I was in Venezuela during the run-up to the Constituent Assembly election. It was widely considered as a call for peaceful dialogue with the country's opposition. And it was completely legal. Article 347 of the Constitution allows for the creation of the Constituent Assembly. Here's the truth. It was absolutely not stacked with Maduro supporters. It was a huge democratic process in which all citizens were eligible to run. Not only was the opposition eligible to run, but highly encouraged by the government to do so. Over 8 million Venezuelans participated in the election of these delegates. But the opposition called for a boycott of the election, and some factions even responded with violence. At least 2 Chavista candidates were assassinated by opposition militants. And on election day, around...
It is, as I say, scandalous that they do not give the coverage, the attention to things published by academics. Now, we've been talking about fake news, about the ocean of lies that we read in the papers every day. But it's not just the lies that create the problem, it's the absence of information. When a whole dimension is suppressed and you do not hear anything about other points of view, sooner or later you accept the narrative that yes, there is a humanitarian crisis, ergo you need a humanitarian intervention, and if Maduro doesn't leave by his own free will, it'll be necessary to topple him. And then you find someone like Juan Guaido, who's going to play the game. I mean, every country has opportunists, and who will be the agent for the United States and for United States transnationals and for the United States oil industry. There are billions of dollars in profits to be made in Venezuela. And thus far, the profits have been used to satisfy the social needs of the Venezuelan people. That, of course, is likely to end if this coup is successful. I mean, if you want to have a coup d'etat in Venezuela, say so. You want a coup d'etat because you want American business to move in and to take the profits. That's where it's at. But it's not a question that you sympathize with the poor, suffering Venezuelan people when it is the United States that is causing that suffering.
Well, at least John Bolton is speaking plainly about taking the oil. You know, you have him on corporate media talking about that. But of course, a lot of people mask this interventionism with humanitarianism. Let's talk about NGOs, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch. People maybe understandably distrust the corporate media, but they do trust entities like these. They consider themselves impartial watchdogs. Why do you think their reporting on Venezuela is just as heavily skewed?
Well, there is, and has been for a while, a human rights industry. Since 1980, when I joined the office, at that time it was called the Division on Human Rights of the United Nations, then a Center for Human Rights, now the Office of the High Commissioner, I've had the opportunity of observing the behavior of non-governmental organizations. Organizations that started out very, very committed for human rights and really honestly concerned with the suffering of human beings have been bought out. the donors essentially set the music. I am so disappointed with many of these non-governmental organizations because I know, for instance, that individuals, civil society, non-governmental organizations in Venezuela, they have produced reports and they have made these reports available to Amnesty International and to Human Rights Watch, and of course to the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. I've used these reports in my own report. I took them seriously. But since they do not play the game, since they are telling you a story that the corporate media doesn't want out, and the donors to Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International, etc., also don't want out, so it gets suppressed. So here you have, as I say, the human rights industry betraying human rights, abandoning the concept of human dignity and using only the rhetoric of human rights.
The opposition against Maduro is broad and comprised of many factions, moderates, progressives, even some socialists. They oppose Maduro but respect the Constitution and democratic process. But the faction currently trying to seize power is the extreme right. Within just 48 hours of declaring himself president, Guaido tried to seize Venezuela's oil production. According to S&P Global Platts, before the coup attempt began, Guaido had already drafted plans for mass privatization of the oil. What are the potential human rights implications if this coup indeed does go through?
Well, what will happen if the coup goes through is that you will have what Naomi Klein called disaster capitalism forced down the throat of the Venezuelan people. You will have retrogression in the enjoyment of economic, social, and cultural rights. You will have the privatization not only of the oil industry, but you will have privatization of gold mining and bauxite mining and coltan mining. They will do away with healthcare. They will do away with subsidized housing, et cetera, as happened already. I mean, I refer our viewers to the Carmona Decree of 11 April 2002. Back in the year 2002, the United States co-financed and conspired in connection with a coup d'etat against Hugo Chavez. That was the 11th of April. The coup d'etat lasted less than 48 hours because Chavez was enormously popular, and the military liberated him and brought him back to Miraflores. Pedro Carmona, the leader of the coup, in those 48 hours, did away with 49 pieces of social legislation, dissolved the Supreme Court, dissolved the National Assembly, because, of course, that National Assembly was Chavista. You will see what a right-wing decree that is, that has basically no democratic legitimacy, whatever, but that entails going back, and that's what they want. They want to go back to the 1980s and 90s, what they perceive as the good old days when the rich were rich and the poor were poor.
You know, how could this erupt into a civil war here? And how can dialogue happen if the opposition is neglecting it? I mean, Maduro's already agreed to it, but the opposition's refusing to do it.
Well, Maduro has been asking the opposition for dialogue since the elections in 2015. And he has given the opposition every opportunity. But if one side thinks we don't have to dialogue because the big guy in Washington with his big stick is going to hit Maduro over the head and is going to catapult Juan Guaido in the position of president of the wealthiest oil-producing country in the world. Civil war, and I told that to members of the opposition. You may topple Maduro, but the 7, 8, or 9 million committed Chavistas are not simply going to roll over. They're not going to disappear. So you may find yourself in a situation of a bloody civil war. Do you want that for your people?
But civil war is sadly not the worst possible scenario here. The reality of a U.S. military attack and invasion of Venezuela is very real, and all under the pretext that the military must deliver the very same life-saving medicines they've been blocking from the country for years. The beat of war drums is deafening. We've now learned U.S. Special Forces have been sent to Puerto Rico, the usual staging ground for U.S. invasions. And the U.S. also threatened the Maduro government with invasion in secret negotiations. And on February 18, Trump again threatened the government, telling Venezuelan soldiers to recognize Guaido now, or there would be, quote, no easy exit, no way out. There's no reason to take these as empty threats. John Bolton orchestrated the most catastrophic war of my lifetime. Elliot Abrams facilitated an actual genocide. And Trump is currently carpet bombing the Middle East. We know how far they're willing to go for big oil and the war machine. Potentially millions of lives are at stake. All people who believe in sovereignty and peace have a role to play here, to do everything in our power to stop this from happening and to shut it down if it starts.
Yeah, this is the cutting edge, and I refer, I go through the pieces, I try give the people the other side of the story. You know, you listen to CNN, BBC, MSNBC, all of these things. Well, we give the other side of the story. Because we know that invasions by the United States have a very weird way of making your economy become null and void and depleted, and your state become a failed state. And all of those corporate cannibals, as we talk about corporate cannibals, corporate cannibals, digital criminals. So, we want to play the last little piece of documentary we have here. We just talk about the invasions, well, the intended invasion and coup d'etat in Venezuela. We want to just refresh your memory, for those of you who know, and if you don't know, you're going to hear, the different countries that America invade in order to decide the government that the people in the country should have. So we want to turn it to Louis Farrakhan again, who, with the aid of the American system, is able to get documents that show you the different countries that America invaded and which of the coups were successful and which were not successful.
The record is clear on the suffering of black and brown and the Native Americans and oppressed people in this nation. But one of the things that the American people are not aware of, they are not aware of America's foreign policy. Did you know that since the inception of this nation, there are presidential records that record the doings of every president? Some of it is secret and some of it is open, but everything is recorded. When the Congress was set up, everything that they said and did, every law that was made, every amendment to the Constitution that was drafted, all of it is in a record. The doings of the Supreme Court are recorded. The doings of each committee that is a part of government, and above all, each department of government has its own record. So today, in this broadcast, we want to open up the record of the atrocious foreign policies of our government. Now, beloved brothers and sisters, foreign policy is something that the American people know very little about. When foreign governments come, especially after 9/11, Middle Eastern countries came and donated money. And one Islamic leader came and donated $10 million to the city of New York. But he said in his donation that he hoped that America would change her foreign policy. Mayor Giuliani sent back to him his $10 million, but all over the earth, wherever I have traveled, wherever people dislike America, it's not the American people necessarily that the people of the earth are angry with or burdened by. It is the foreign policy of the government of the United States. So, a lot of enemies that America makes, they make them for the American people. So the American people would like to know, why is it that we are hated in the world? Because America's view of herself is that we are a good nation. And by and large, if the people knew better, most of them would do better. But at the top of things, you have a satanic, demonic mind that is the architect of America's foreign policy. This foreign policy has objectives, and this foreign policy has national interests. But the American people don't know necessarily what those interests are, and they don't necessarily know what the foreign policy objective of their government is toward the nations and people of the earth. Now, how you treat the ethnic groups, the racial groups within America is how you will treat those that come from other nations to be made Americans. So if our government does not have a good domestic policy toward Mexican people, how will they have a good policy toward the Mexican nation? If they don't have a good domestic policy toward Cubans or Haitians or Guatemalans or Hondurans or Jamaicans or Barbadians or Africans in America and in the diaspora, how could America's policies be good for them if they're not good for those who live within the borders of what is called the United States of America? The Chinese, the Koreans, all of those from Southeast Asia, even Europeans have tasted of the meddling of America in the affairs of their nations. So without further delay, I would like to read to you a partial list of the United States covert actions abroad to impose or restore favorable political conditions from 1946 to 1983. This list was prepared by Tom Gervasi of the Center for Military Research and Analysis in 1984, and it was compiled using information available in the public domain. We will also quote from a 1984 edition of Harper's Magazine. It starts in 1946 in Greece. Now, Greece, as you know, is in Europe. The Americans wanted to restore the monarch after the overthrow of the Metaxas government. And through the efforts of our government, our CIA or those clandestine organizations of the country, the monarch was restored. From 1946 to 1955 in West Germany, an average of $6 million annually was sent to support former Nazi intelligence network of General Reinhard Gehlen, and this was considered successful. From 1948 to 1968 in Italy, an average of $30 million annually in payments to political and labor leaders to support anti-communist candidates in Italian elections. And that was considered successful. Again, in 1949, Greece, military assistance to anti-communist forces in the Greek Civil War. And from America's vantage point, it was successful. Now we're all in Europe. In Poland, financial and military assistance for Polish freedom and independence movement, unsuccessful. In 1950, in Albania, in Europe, the overthrow of government Enver Hoxha, unsuccessful. In 1951 to 1954, in China, airdrop guerrilla teams into the People's Republic of China, unsuccessful. In 1953, in Iran, the overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh and his government to install Shah Zahedi cost $10 million, successful. In the Philippines, assassination and propaganda campaign to overcome the Huk resistance and install the government of Ramon Magsaysay. It was successful. In Costa Rica, to overthrow the government of Jose Figueres, unsuccessful. In South Vietnam, America installed the government of Ngo Dinh Diem. It was successful. In 1954, in West Germany, America arranged the abduction and discreditation of West German intelligence chief Otto John and replaced him with Reinhard Gehlen, and that was successful. In Guatemala, in Central America, America overthrew the government of Jacobo Arbenz Guzman and replaced him with Carlos Castilla Armas. Successful. Intervention, meddling in the affairs of other nations. In China, they were trying to assassinate Zhou Enlai en route to the Bandung Conference in 1955, and that was unsuccessful. In 1956 in Cuba, they wanted to establish an anti-communist police force, Bureau de Represión Actividades Comunistas, under the Batista regime. And under Batista, it was successful. In Syria, they wanted to overthrow the Ghazi government, aborted by the Israeli invasion of Egypt. 1956 and 1957 in Jordan, in the Middle East, an average of $750,000 annually in personal payments to King Hussein. According to the United States government, payments ceased when this was disclosed in 1976. In Lebanon, in 1957, Lebanon is in the Middle East. Financial assistance for the election of a pro-American candidate to the Lebanese parliament. It was successful. In Cambodia, our government assassinated Prince Norodom Sihanouk. It was unsuccessful, but they attempted his assassination. In Guatemala, military assistance, including the use again of B-26 bombers for the government of Miguel Ydigoras Fuentes to defeat the rebel forces, successful. In Angola, now we're going to Africa, financial and military assistance to the rebel forces of Olden Ruberto. It's inconclusive how that turned out. But in Laos, in Southeast Asia, again, military assistance, including 400 United States Special Forces troops to deny the plain of Jaz Bad Mekong Basin to the Pathet Lao. Inconclusive. In Cuba, from 1961 to 1963, our government attempted to assassinate Fidel Castro, and there were 6 attempts from 61 to 63. All of them were unsuccessful. In 1961, Cuba, America trained and supported the invasion force of Cuban exiles to overthrow the Castro government and assist their invasion at the Bay of Pigs at a cost of $62 million taxpayer dollars, unsuccessful. In the Congo, precipitate the conditions leading to the assassination of Patrice Lumumba, successful. In the Dominican Republic, precipitate conditions leading to the assassination of Rafael Trujillo, successful. In 1961 to 1966, Cuba, broad sabotage program, including terrorist attacks. Listen to the language. Terrorist attacks on the American side on coastal targets and bacteriological warfare in order to weaken the Castro government, but that was unsuccessful. 1962 to 1964, in British Guyana in South America, organized labor strikes and riots to overthrow the government of Chedi Jagan, successful. In 1962 to 1964, in South America, in the government and nation of Brazil, America organized campaigns of labor strikes and propaganda to overthrow the government of Raul Goulart, successful. Dominican Republic, to overthrow the government of Juan Bosch in a military coup, successful. In El Salvador, in Central America, organized Orden and Ancestral, domestic intelligence networks under the direction of General Jose Alberto Medrano and Colonel Nicolas Carranza, and provide intelligence support and training in surveillance, interrogation, and assassination techniques. This is all from our government in foreign policy objectives. Let me continue. In Iraq, financial and military assistance for the Freedom Party of Mullah Mustafa al-Barzani in an effort to establish an independent Kurdistan. It was unsuccessful. They wanted to divide Iraq and separate the Kurds from the Sunni and the Shiite. Now think about wanting to separate And we are asking our government as what must be done by you to separate us into a state or territory of our own, because you know you have no future for us but back to your foreign policy. In Chile, $20 million in assistance for Eduardo Frei to defeat Salvador Allende in the Chilean elections. America was successful. In Brazil, Guatemala, Uruguay, and the Dominican Republic provide training. What kind of training? In assassination, in interrogation techniques for police and intelligence personnel. Inconclusive. In the Congo, in Africa, financial and military assistance, including B-26 and T-28 aircraft, and American and exiled Cuban pilots for Joseph Mobutu and Cyril Adula, and later for Moise Tshombe in Katanga province to defeat rebel forces loyal to Lumumba. America was successful. In 1964 to 1967, South Vietnam, Phoenix program to eliminate Viet Cong political infrastructure through more than 20,000 assassinations. Now, I did not write this. This is written by experts who have the files of America's covert actions. Don't turn away from your television. You, the American people, must listen and look, because if you don't, you will be deceived into thinking that America's foreign policy objectives are moral, are ethical. They are anything but that. Let's continue. Now think about this. America sending our special forces troops in other nations to assassinate, to sabotage, to ambush people and missions. This is meddling, creating mischief, and causing the shedding of blood. In Peru, America's money, taxpayer dollars, provided training in assassination and interrogation techniques for Peruvian police and intelligence personnel, similar to the training given in Uruguay, Brazil, and the Dominican Republic in an effort to defeat the resistance movement. This was unsuccesssul. In Indonesia, to organize a campaign of propaganda to overthrow the Sukarno government and precipitate conditions leading to the massacre of more than 500,000 members of Indonesian Communist Party in order to eliminate opposition to the new Suharto government imposed on Indonesia by the United States of America. In 1967, in Bolivia, in South America, our government assisted that government in the capture of Ernesto Che Guevara, and they were successful. And as you know, Che Guevara was assassinated in Bolivia. In Greece, the overthrow of the government of George Papandreou and install a military government of Colonel George Papadopoulos after the abdication of King Constantine. Successful. But is it meddling? Is it interfering in the internal affairs of others? What is the purpose of such a foreign policy? In Chile, South America, campaign of assassinations, propaganda, labor strikes, and demonstrations to overthrow the government of Salvador Allende with a cost of 8,400,000 American taxpayer dollars, and this was successful. In Angola, the military assistance to forces of Olden Roberto and Jonas Savimbi to defeat the forces of the Popular Movement for the Liberation of Angola during the Angola Civil War, and to prevent the MPLA from forming a new government. And America was unsuccessful. In Jamaica, in the Caribbean, a military coup to overthrow the government of Michael Manley, unsuccessful. In 1984, in Angola, financial and military assistance to the forces of Jonas Savimbi to harass and destabilize Neto and succeeding governments, inconclusive. In Jamaica, again in the Caribbean, financial pressure to destabilize the government of Michael Manley and campaign propaganda and demonstrations to defeat his government in elections, and it was successful. We're coming to the end, but this is just not all of the covert operations, just a small amount of them. So, my beloved brothers and sisters, this continues. You can see from this that our government has been involved in foreign policy objectives to preserve and protect national interests. Well, let me go immediately to national interests. I'd like to start with the words of Mr. Perkins, who admitted that he was a member, that he called himself a part of the economic hitman. From the book by John Perkins called Hoodwinked, an American hitman reveals why the world financial markets imploded and what we need to do to remake them. These are quotes from Mr. Perkins. He quotes, "I was an economic hitman, part of an elite corps of modern-day hired guns who promote the interests of big corporations and certain sectors of the United States government. Although we economic hitmen work in many ways, our most common task is to identify countries with resources our corporations covet." Remember the 10 Commandments of Moses, the last of the 10. Do not covet your neighbor's house, your neighbor's wife, your neighbor's ox, your neighbor's donkey, anything that belongs to your neighbor, do not covet. But here, our government covets or desires the resources from other nations, and these economic hitmen are sent to identify countries with resources that American corporations covet. Then, he says, we seduce, bribe, and extort their leaders into exploiting their own people, accepting loans the countries can never repay, privatizing their national assets, legalizing the destruction of fragile environments, and finally selling those coveted resources to our corporations at bargain prices. And when the leaders resist, they are overthrown or assassinated by CIA-sponsored jackals. And a jackal is in the wolf or dog family. And these are human beings that feed on carrion or feed on dead things, or these hitmen feed on weak nations. Again, Mr. Perkins, in the Confessions of an Economic Hitman, said, "My job is to encourage world leaders to become part of a vast network that promotes U.S. commercial interests. In the end, those leaders become ensnared in a web of debt that ensures their loyalty. We can draw on them whenever we desire to satisfy our political, economic, or military needs. If an economic hitman is completely successful, the loans are so large that the debtor or the recipient country is forced to default on its payments after a few years. And when this happens, then, like the mafia, we demand our pound of flesh. This often includes one or more of the following: control over United Nations votes. 2, the installation of military bases or access to precious resources such as oil or the Panama Canal. Of course, the debtor still owes us the money, and another country is added to our global empire. I want to close with this serpent that deceived the whole world. And when you see the picture on the screen, the serpent's head is America, but its tail is curled around the nations of the earth, as you have heard today.
I want to give thanks to the moment, give thanks to the time, give thanks. Black Princess, they are with me in the night, yeah? I them change her. I walk there. Yes, yes. Why you look vital, you know? Yes, and why you look the ones them at Kingston, me hungry. Why me I tell you, give thanks. Why you look Marjorie, you know? Marjorie? Yeah, man, give thanks, man. Things your husband can't come between we. Can't come between we. Oh. Okay. So you know, so we go there. No, well, Jimmy Cliff. They're going to rename Gloucester Avenue for Jimmy Cliff Boulevard. And you know, so we're going there? Yeah, we're going there. We're going there. We're going there. Jimmy Cliff Boulevard. Hey, Matrix, you didn't know, say outside of Bob Marley, Jimmy Cliff sang them covered by foreigners more than any other artist outside of Bob Marley. Yeah, man. You see how that tune, yeah? A whole heap of people sing that tune, you know. Many rivers to cross. Them have the Mount of Virgin and many rivers to cross. And the list goes on and on. Yeah, man.